The percentage allocation to recurrent expenditure, that's about 4-point-something trillion. Now, the president also indicated that he will be transmitting a bill to the National Assembly for a new national minimum wage. That's a topic that we have discussed on this program. Labour insisting on at least 30,000, state governors insisting that they cannot pay that. Perhaps there might be a differential between the federal government and the state governments on that account. But going into 2019, the bill on new minimum wage comes and the lawmakers consider and hopefully pass it. How much of a distortion are we likely to see to the current figures that the president has put together with respect to the 2019 appropriation? Because if your recurrent personnel costs, it's a huge chunk of your recurrent expenditure already at over 4 trillion naira, what would that mean?
Okay, thank you. First and foremost, we are happy that the 2019 budget have already captured. 2019 budget have already captured the proposed minimum wage. But having said that, we are looking at recurrent expenditure of 4-point-something trillion of a budget size of 8.8 trillion. So close to 48% or thereabouts. Now we have the loan servicing, another 2-point-something, making it up to 6-point-something trillion of 8-point-something trillion expenditure. So that's really on the high side. But having said that, so if I'm to project the year 2019 in view of the anticipated political activities that will be going on, we expect to experience definitely today, this morning, the Federal Reserve in America have already increased the interest rate further by 0.25%. So we are definitely going to experience a push, a whole lot of sell-off and foreign direct investment leaving. That is one. Two, we are going to experience more spending by way of political financing. Printing of posters, adverts, and the whole what have you. So more money, more cash will be pumped into the economy next year. That's what I'm trying to say. So definitely that will push the inflation if care is not taken. Also, the M2, the money in circulation also next year, we are definitely projecting that it will be increased. So if you look at the CBN last at the CBN committee meeting last time, it held almost all the benchmarks. It did unchanged simply because it's the members were anticipating that there's going to be more spending. So more spending by way of political activity. So what I'm trying to say in essence is definitely we are going to have we are going to have pressure on the inflation, which, if care is not taken, might precipitate the CBN to raise the monetary committee here to raise the benchmark, both the cash, the CRR, and the MPR. So if that is raised, automatically it's going to increase the interest rate banks will be expecting from these SMEs. But we are happy yesterday that Mr. President also, built a buffer by way of all those reserves from agriculture and the Bank of Industry. So we expect these other organizations to subsidize the interest rate for SMEs. I think next year we will experience more pressure, but if care is not taken, if not well managed, the interest rates might actually be very, very exorbitant for SMEs.
Okay, thank you very much, Prince Will. I just bring in again distinguished Senator Eno. Senator Eno, well, Prince Will already went into areas of the rates. But the first question, again, let me rephrase it, which has to do with the minimum wage and the impact that might have on the recurrent component of the 2019 appropriation. What are we likely to see? Because minimum wage, I mean, from the discussions that we've always had, it doesn't just have to do with the shop floor figure. It goes right across to the over 1 million or so employees of the federal service, the federal public service, for that matter. Plus, concerns about election year spent and how that might impact on the rate of inflation, which the government is projecting at 9.98%.
Well, I think I mean, unfortunately, it's not the first time we're going to an election, and I think that the CBN itself, knows that it has to continue to monitor these rates and these developments because of the added spending, political spending. But I think that Mr. President properly and truly appreciates the impact and the implication and all there is over a proposed minimum wage. And that's why the budget speech and presentation didn't just go straight ahead to just go and say, this has been done, this has been done. I mean, it's taking it step by step. Because like you said, it has a lot of ripple effect. It has a lot of, it's quite tricky and quite complex. So if you're not careful, you're going to get yourself into quite a lot of problems trying to implement it. So what has he said in consideration of this, or in appreciation of this? There will be a technical committee that's going to properly examine all this comprehensively. When that is true, in sending the bill for the minimum wage, Mr. President also intends to, back it up with a finance bill. The figure of 2-point-something trillion for personnel hasn't taken into account or captured that expected spike in terms of personnel spending that government is going to. And that's why it's going to send a minimum wage bill, it's going to send a finance bill to take care of a few possible effects. I mean, is there going to be, how much are you going to control the possibility of job losses? Because state governments or federal government wants to have a greater ability to be able to fund. How much are you going to be able to control exposure to having to go and collect loans and debts and get indebted as a result of trying to fund? So I think that quite a number of things are already in place to try to contain, the fallout of increased spending, and the CBN is doing that, and then increased spending exerted by political activities and all that. The CBN is doing that and monitoring that closely. And then secondly, the minimum wage, that is going to come with the added, expenditures, and therefore the step-by-step approach that the president himself has indicated in the budget speech yesterday.
Thank you very much, Senator Eno. Now, Honorable Nandas, from what Senator Eno is saying, there must be strategic plans that should be put in place. And if we must go in line with the growth plan of this budget, of the economy generally also, what should be in place, to avoid unnecessary deficits? Now, the debt service was put at 2.14 trillion naira. Now, how do we, avoid unnecessary deficits if we must be in line with the growth plan?
Yes, I think the deficit is prices of goods and services have just skyrocketed by a mere pronouncement of the fact that there's good. And people have forgotten to know also that there are 3 tiers of government. Now, the state governments are still negotiating, and they're still talking about, can we meet up? The federal government has concluded, okay, I can be able to pay this, and this person, I cannot be able to pay this. But I think, generally, there's an agreement that we need wage increase, and the president, in acknowledging that, said, look, I'm going to send a bill to the House, but I cannot just send a bill until the technical committee do a particular work. And part of this technical committee knows very well that of the multiply effect that it's going to have on the economy, and they will advise on how this thing will come. And we in the National Assembly are waiting patiently, regardless of the fact that there's an election, just like the Senator said. Look, every 4 years, people should expect that, look, there's going to be an election. It's not as if we have been ambushed by an election, and therefore, as if we are not prepared for it, and therefore we just have to spend anyhow. We are already aware that, look, election is coming every 4 years in Nigeria. So we get prepared to get, and we also capture this problem that we are about to have. I think with good technical people around and experts around, we can get out of it.
Honorable Namdas, thank you very much. But let me return to Senator Eno. Senator Eno, now, one of the critical rates the president referred to in his presentation yesterday has to do with the exchange rate, which has been maintained at 305 naira to the dollar. Knowledgeable experts have often raised questions as to the maintenance of multiple exchange rates. Not as many as we used to have in the past, but at 305, you go to the BDCs, that's the Bureau de Change, it rates about 350, 360, 356. What needs to be done, to narrow the gap and therefore also reduce the incidence of arbitrage?
Well, I mean, first, and I've had this, on and on, almost every year. It's the second time I'm chairing the Finance Committee. I did so when I was in the House of Reps. Normally, when the budget is presented like this, maybe either at the point of MTEF consideration, you normally invite the CBN, have some interaction with the CBN about, and there are always concerns. I mean, the market price is this, the market rate is this, and the budget, so first the challenge is to get those two rates to align. That's the challenge of every administration, and the challenge of this administration. But the truth is that the official rate at 305 cannot be chasing that market rate, cannot be chasing what's going on there. Because any country that allows that to happen, you're just handing over the economy to, other people to control for you. It's and what does all this mean? You see, as long as, we just need to continue to earn more in terms of foreign exchange, in terms of, as long as there is enough, foreign currency, there's enough, inflows coming into the country, that is how it's going to get easier and easier to begin to align. And I'm glad you considered the fact that in the past there were multiple, right? So quite some gains and quite some progress has been achieved. I mean, the CBN, once in a while, releases such and such an amount to try to, to check that. Unfortunately, that has been where we've had our greatest challenge, even with foreign partners, and all that, who think that the government cannot continue to support, a certain exchange rate and all that. But you need to do a balance of both. A lot of efforts are being made. If you look at the foreign reserves are also doing remarkably well, and that as long as it's a continuing, the ideal situation is what both the CBN and the Minister of Finance and the government will continue to work towards trying to achieve. As long as there is as long as there is scarcity, that is how much that is going to continue to exist. But the efforts are being made, and there's seriousness in that to try to make sure that things get okay in terms of an alignment of both rates.
All right. Thank you very much, Senator Eno. Let's return to Prince Will Ezeoku. Prince Will Ezeoku, now the debt profile of the country, as you have seen from the figures, what has been allocated for debt servicing in 2019 is a figure that is there. Now, over the past 3 years or more, one argument that government officials have often made has to do with the fact that the nation's debt to GDP ratio wasn't one that should cause one any sense of alarm. And we have also seen how at the beginning, there was a great mismatch between treasury bills, the rates for treasury bills as well as interest rate, and how even commercial financial institutions moved into treasury bills, which has now ballooned. The redemption of those treasury bills has ballooned into part of the debt obligations of the government. Is our debt structure, from your point of view, still a concern?
Definitely, like what the senator said, with a continuous fall in revenue generation. So our debt to GDP or debt to revenue is actually a concern. The first thing we need to address, if I may speak on the issue of different market price and different official price of dollar, is that first and foremost, we must change the dynamics of our economy to be a manufacturing-centered economy. When you manufacture, when you produce locally some of the things you use, it will go a long way in reducing your cash outflow by way of imports. Now, having said that, what is the concern of the current government? What should be the concern of the current government in line with our debt profile? First and foremost, the during the period we had the NPR, around 14, of course, for the past 20-something months now, around 14.something%. Of course, that, cost the banks. Definitely, you can't have your interest, you can't have your inflation rate at 15%, and you are giving your treasury bill at 10%. Of course, nobody would buy. So, since the inflation rate was above 15%, so the federal government needed to give at least a premium on that interest rate on the treasury bill. So that, is a market force. It attracted the banks. It's understandable. Every investor would actually want to take that. Even outsiders, outside investors, they actually partook in that. But if you look at the investment or the government loans or assets outside the shores of the country, some of them is the green bond, for instance, is 7%. Now, 7%, which on its own is slower than the 15% we are doing locally. Of course, we agree that local sourcing of funds has more triple effects. Like it crowds out other finances. If I have money, I can actually deposit in the bank as fixed deposits at 15%, and the government is giving me treasury bill at 20%. Definitely, I will go for treasury bill. So I will not go to the bank. Now, what it happens is that it will reduce the cash, the portfolio income now for the bank, which would automatically reduce the portfolio of investment which the banks will give out. So what I'm trying to say in essence is that, changing the dynamics from domestic to foreign is good in itself, but we need to, at this point in time, ensure that we put the exchange rates to check. Because if we allow the exchange rates to what happened to it in towards the first quarter of this administration, where the dollar was selling to around the 400 and something naira. If we do that, that means our loan portfolio, because you need to dollarize it, will now be very, very high. So while we are going for foreign, so that we still have resources to play around domestically, we need to ensure that we put our exchange rate at a serious check.
Thank you very much, Mr. Princewell. And just your final thoughts now, Honorable Nandas, before we come to Senator Eno for his final remarks. What do you make of all of this? Budget, we know, is a futuristic document. What are the prospects for this?
Yes, I think yesterday the president said yes, the oil production was 2.3 million barrels per day, but couldn't met in 2018 got about 1.98 barrels per day, and we're expecting revenue. But the good thing he said yesterday that look, there's an oil field that they're expecting about 200,000 barrels when they start exploration. So I think that is an advantage. Look, we are hopeful that we can meet our 2.3 million barrels per day, and that means translate to income coming so that we can fund the budget. I think I'm hopeful that that will work for us.
All right, both Honorable Namdas and distinguished Senator Eno, at the beginning of this program, you spoke optimistically about the disposition of the lawmakers to the consideration of the budget. That fine, you shown political considerations and the pressures of electioneering to focus on the budget. But here's what we have noticed over the years. When the lawmakers begin to consider, these are your colleagues and yourselves, begin to consider the appropriation, there will be issues pertaining to the distribution of the projects in the budget by Mr. President. There will also be what has been a knotty problem, the issue of constituency projects. Are we likely to overcome the hurdles, the attitudes that will come and the lingering delays that these two issues often normally will bring while considering the appropriation bill? Senator Eno first and then Namdas.
Well, most of what you've mentioned are normal things. I mean, and that's why the budget has been laid for consideration. I mean, as long as the Parliament, the National Assembly is not a rubber-stamped National Assembly, the engagements that normally are, anticipated, and so these are the engagements that would normally now get the document to be such a document that becomes a budget after assent. So that shouldn't be a problem. Like I said, normal things. You talked about constituency. But I think we've gone, in the last years, every year, we've done better. We've gone beyond the bickering over, both the executive and the legislative arm have agreed to a standard. And that is no longer an issue, is no longer a problem. So the bottom line is that the back and forth, the engagements, the deliberations about the budget are normal practice and shouldn't be a problem in terms of an early passage of the budget or in terms of what document comes out of the National Assembly.
Are we going to expect an early passage this year? Because it took 6 months last year.
Well, if it takes 6 months this time, what it means that this National Assembly will come to an end without passing the budget. And I've said so before, that's one of the variables that will also determine the fact that the commitment of the National Assembly is such that we're also looking at when is the end, when would the end of this tenure be, and therefore you can't afford to not to pass the budget before that time. So basically, I think that, and I've said we're going to go on recess for Christmas, for New Year, and we're going to come back, and as soon as we come back, that becomes the first matter on the agenda of the National Assembly.
Honorable Namdas will backstage negotiation. We've had you on this before. Yes.
I think Nigeria should always have it at the back of their minds that legislators will always work on the document. It is just a proposal and a mere estimate. When it comes, we are the one that turns it to actually a budget. It's supposed to say bill. And we will always work on it. We will always tinker. And that's one. On the issue of constituency projects, they're always there. This even gives me an opportunity to even say, I saw reports that, look, the 50% of constituency allowances have been released to the National Assembly members. Of course, you see, people should understand that it's not even called constituency allowance. As if you say allowance, it's like the members share the money. It's the constituency projects, and up to now, I have not been able to, we have not gotten it. So I think the contractors that are supposed to do these things have yet been mobilized. So I think it's not like that, but we are committed to it.
All right, gentlemen, I would like to thank you for being part of our conversation this morning on the 2019 Appropriation Bill that was laid before the joint session of the National Assembly yesterday by President Muhammadu Buhari. Thanks to Prince Will Ezioko, a development finance expert. Thanks a lot for being with us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you.
We also would like to thank Honorable Abdul Razak Namdas, Chairman of the House of Representatives Committee on Media and Public Affairs. Always a delight having you on the program. Similarly, too, big thanks to Senator John Eno, who is Chairman of Senate Committee on Finance. Senator, thanks a lot for being around always.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so let's go over now to our sports desk.
Nigeria under-17 side, the Golden Eaglet, will know their group opponents of the 2019 Africa Cup of Nations today, when the draw is staged in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. The draw ceremony will take place at the Limani City Conference Center, Dar es Salaam. The Golden Eaglet are drawn in Pot 2, along with Morocco, Senegal and Uganda. The competition, which is scheduled to be played between April 14 and 28, will see the top 4 teams represent Africa at the 2019 FIFA Under-17 World Cup in Peru, October. And Nigeria's forward Alexi Iwobi made his second Carabao Cup start for Arsenal, who crashed out of the competition after losing 2-0 to their North London rivals, Tottenham. Song Ugmin scored the opener for Tottenham in the 28th minutes of the game before Dele Alli wrapped up the win for Spurs in the 59th minutes. Alex Iwobi was subbed up for Alexandre Lacazette in the 58th minutes, and at Stamford Bridge, Victor Moses was excluded from Chelsea's match-day squad for the game against Bournemouth. After a goalless first half, Victor Moses has played 5 times this season for Chelsea, with his last game against Bath on the 25th of October.
All right, now moving on to foreign news, let's join Patricia Esami Loba for developments trending from around the globe.
The European Commission says in case the United Kingdom crashes out of the European Union without a plan, it has started to implement its preparations for a no-deal Brexit. It has therefore announced temporary measures to try to reduce the impact, but says it cannot counter all the problems it expects. As Prime Minister Theresa May's proposed exit plan flounders in Parliament, both sides are preparing for the worst-case situation, says the report. And down to South Africa, prosecutors have issued an arrest warrant for Zimbabwe's ex-First Lady, Grace Mugabe, for allegedly assaulting a model, Gabriela Angels, in 2017, says the report. The move comes after a court annulled her diplomatic immunity in July, and South Africa's government was criticized for letting her leave the country after the alleged assault. Lastly, election campaigning in Kinshasa, the capital of Democratic Republic of Congo, has been suspended ahead of Sunday's presidential vote for security reasons. A top government official said authorities have intelligence that oppositions in the camps of the main candidates planned to cause chaos during the campaigns.
Thank you very much, Patricia Isamiluba, there for the developments around the world. Let's go over now to the weather center to check out what the weather will be like for the rest of today.
A warm welcome. We have dust in suspension across the country, and we observe fresh dust raised over Fire Lagoon. We expect this dust to graze the northern part of the country within the next 24 hours. And for Thursday, we expect visibility from the north down to the inland to be from 2 to 5 kilometers in dust haze conditions, with localized visibility of less than 1,000 meters. The coastal cities will experience an early morning mist. And by afternoon, weather conditions across the country will remain the same, except for the coastal region, where hazy condition is anticipated. Up next is the temperature forecast across some selected cities. I am Akami Samarka.